There are some terms that Aristotle makes up. Um, he's not quite so mysterious with it as Heidegger is. I think Heidegger kind of likes to do that Heidegger's basic shtick is our language is inadequate, so I have to come up with these things in order to make this work. Um, but when he does make up a term, he'll see if there's something available. So like think back to when we're talking about right ambition. Aristotle says that the proper disposition is nameless, and that within his society, there's only two terms. There's unambitious, aphilotimia, and then there's ambitious, philotimia, seeking out, desiring honor, and that one is at one extreme and the other is at the other extreme, and that what we want is really in the middle. He says this about one other virtue, and I'm blanking on the one that he does, but he's not inclined to like say, okay, I need to make up a whole new term. He tries to see if there's something. So yeah, you're right. He is like saying, do we have anything like this already? And there's a bigger issue here actually when it comes to what we call moral vocabulary. I think we suffer from having maybe too many terms that people use in too many different ways in our society, right? And so lighting on the right description of an action or a series of actions that we call a comportment, that are reflective of a person's character, that's really quite important. And a lot of people in our society, and I think throughout time, are very sloppy with this. And you do see a lot of attentiveness to this proper description throughout moral philosophy. So like Saint Anselm, for example, in his works, you'll notice him saying, we should rightly describe this action this way rather than this way. And then if we do describe it the right way, the puzzles about it start to break down. Thomas Aquinas actually calls this the moral species of an act, the species being the type, right? So let's say we take something where there's like a story to be told. You see me go up and punch somebody in the face, and you're like, oh, that's a wrongful action. Look at him. He just walked right up and cold cocked that guy, right? So walking up and cold cocking that guy is a description of an action. And then let's say Harold says, oh, no, you missed the first part of it. That guy was throwing darts at him. And, one of the darts didn't hit him, but it hit his kid in the head and stuck into his kid's head, right? And then you're like, well, okay, so now he wasn't just cold cocking the guy, he was retaliating against aggression. Now that's a different description, right? And we evaluate these in very different ways. And then let's say, somebody else, so Martin's here, Martin comes along and Martin says, oh yeah, but what you failed to realize is this guy actually had Greg sign a waiver because this is a dart throwing zone. We get better and better descriptions about what's going on. When we do that, we can evaluate the moral species of the act. We can say what it essentially is. And you see like Immanuel Kant doing this with his, concern about what is the maxim of your action, right? So, the language that we use to describe things is incredibly important. And this fits in. One last thing to say about this. Aristotle in the rhetoric seems to be a little bit cynical, even in the topics, because he's like, well, because you can describe an action multiple ways, if you have to defend somebody in court, you say they weren't trying to deliberately harm this person, they were doing this instead. They were doing this other thing, right? So yeah, Aristotle, he will coin some new terms. Consider like energeia, which can be activity or function or all these different things. That's him using a philosophical vocabulary that he's pushing. Just as a last thing on this, I think too many people in contemporary analytic philosophy and contemporary continental philosophy like to invent terms um, when it's they don't need to. If they were better, I don't want to say philosophers, but better, if they're more articulate, they would just be able to find some language that actually works for it without having to like make up a new term. Sometimes you do need to, like, so Harry Frankfurt died recently, right? I think all of you know that news. And what he's really well known for is this idea of second order desires. Not a totally new idea, people have talked about this before, but he saw the importance of the phenomenon. And then he thought, okay, we need to be able to describe this in some way. But you notice that he's using two terms that were already existing within the language, and he's not using them in some weird way, some idiosyncratic way. He's doing what analytic philosophy, when it's good stuff, is doing, sort of clarifying the language.